Thank you. And yeah, I hope the festival has been going so far so well. I just arrived 2 hours ago, and so I'm landing, which is also a beautiful process. And so a few words about me that you know who is talking is that so I'm a scholar specialized to extreme environments and Harvard Stanford affiliate and been working in North Korea and in Amazon and Middle East and now recently in transformative festivals. And it has been a hobby, the week-long festivals such as this, since 2015-16. And that's what also brings me to this page, to share a bit of the knowledges that have been acquired, which is that me and a team of scholars, we've collected roughly 500 stories from these festivals, and that's I'm going to share a bit of that data, and also share a bit of lessons learned on different type of events, and especially we are focusing on the science part of it. And it's really an honor to be in these environments as a scholar. Like we don't it's a rare treat, and we don't perhaps the scholars don't find the events even though they study them. And also it's like I don't blame, for example, you guys that if you are not reading science, in terms of like one article cost $40 and it's boring as hell. So my job is, and I really like the job, is to package that information to a format that is a bit of artistic and a bit more appealing than the Excel sheet. And I hope we'll going to have a nice lecture, and then we'll have a bit of a workshop, those who wish, and then it'll take total perhaps max 2 hours, one and a half hours. So just that you know a bit of where we are at. And at any questions you have at any point, you're free to ask. And also good to know that this is the session is recorded and it will be available online afterwards. And yeah, a few words about when I mentioned that me and the team have been going to the festivals is that there are different types of the week-long transformative festivals, and so we've been mainly working in Burns and Burning Man, Black Rock City is, and I'm hosting a Burning Nerd scientific conference in the city. If you ever end up in Black Rock City, do drop by. It's good fun. It's the nerds of the city are gathering, and then we'll have a good time. And then on also been recently doing the same in Boom and Ozora, and now first time here. So this is the kind of, and I work closely with an anthropologist called Terje Tomisto. She specialized to Soviet hippies. So my specialty is on organization science and in that domain and science art, but it's fairly transdisciplinary. But just that you get a bit of setting the stage of what we are doing. About the session is that first there will be a short snapshot of the research and what when we talk about transformative festivals, it's kind of a mandatory that we start by looking into psychedelics. So I'm going to show few slides on what's the state of the psychedelics research field at the moment, and then we'll look on specifically on the impact of transformative festivals. What do we know scientifically on it? And then we move on towards like how to access and understand these experiences, very unique, very powerful, that more or less we all are going through at this very moment. So how to access and understand this, and then sharing a bit of the narrative data, what we have. And then illustrating when we are talking about the impact, I'm going to share a bit of examples how artists and communities have used these stories, and then we are going to create a bit of transformation is by a story writing workshop, and also if you want to share your story to everyone else. It was very powerful in Boom, is that because that's how we create meaning, is since the Stone Age, culture has developed by telling stories. And so it's still how we develop our cultures. Is no matter what tech we have or everything, it's the human to human stories are very powerful me. And what's as a the discussion is like curious to hear your views. What makes this place, or is this place special? How it is special? And have this and Q&A on with me is possible anything, be it on events, on experiences in extremes, and all that kind of things. And as a disclaimer, this research that I'm going to present, the story research, it's funded by no one. It's completely voluntary, and also all the views presented, all the arguments presented, they are grounded to peer-reviewed research, and there are references of that particular research. So that because during times like these, we are dealing so much mumbo jumbo, and as a scholar, I want to present high-quality research, and wish to bring this argument forward. And slides are available if you want to have them, of course, per request. And so a snapshot of the psychedelic research field. A short question, like who are the persons who follow, like not so closely, but also closely this particular field? Like, do you attend seminars, conferences? Okay, yeah. So on when we talk about the psychedelic research field, is that it's more or less we are currently talking about the Renaissance. Is that that what happened in the 70s and 60s was kind of attempt of like really radical experiments, like and that there were those scholars that back then they were kind of even rogue and did experiments that would not be considered ethically as valid, like it's when taking acid to like really excessive amounts, and as an example. And so obviously, like government did its role as a government, and then everything became more or less illegal. And also the hippie movement became so powerful that, and also the hippies themselves couldn't organize. So it kind of like, it then went down, it became almost underground, and scholars are still studying underground, like for example, DMT, is because there are no permissions to certain DMT experiments, the scholars do it by themselves. And they like it's not that they would do it because they want to be in that particular world, but simply that they are doing really groundbreaking science and publishing it in a very good journals. So this second renaissance is it has started fairly recently, and what has been driving it are the clinical studies. And what I mean by clinical studies is that we more or less know, which is published in Journal of Science, Nature, is that that generally psychedelics are good for people. So it's kind of like it's stamped, and now it's kind of like it gets to a very interesting point where there are like multiple actors looking into it, and it took a time. Obviously, it took a time the scientific journals to publish it. And it was not easy, but now we are more or less, and also on especially in the therapeutic use, and in the therapeutic use, it's MDMA and ketamine kind of towards front end of it, and therapeutic use of LSD, except microdosing, that's a pretty tricky thing to also to study. But on MDMA and ketamine, it's a common agreement among scholars that these help for certain traumas. But also it's on what it has resulted is hype. So it's subjected, psychedelics are subjected a lot of hype, and it's almost to an extent that it can be a bit counterproductive and counter-effective. Is that, for example, it's if we see always them as positive and leave without studies that okay, now everything is becoming legal and we should legalize everything. I'm not like it's that kind of discussion should be looked very carefully. Like if we think about like that, it would be everything would be available everywhere. It could be rather chaotic and under any supervisions, certain substances of course can be very dangerous on that. And this is like now there are like certain voices that, for example, these psychedelic treatments are speeding towards approval, but no one knows how they work. And this is in nature. And it's still that there are statements of this, like we do not have the whole picture, but we do know that based on like really big numbers is that, but still it's that the hype is driving towards a kind of a bit of towards unknown. But nevertheless, it's if many things in planet are going towards wrong direction, in this we are going to a pretty good direction. So and this brings hope to many. Also that there is a lot of wisdoms in this, and of course there are different psychedelics are used in a very different ways across planet. So on like that's also where we lack understanding. Then on what is I think personally fascinating field is and I have a paper coming out on this is are the kind of like critical psychedelic studies. So they look to it that okay, it's great thing that we do know how certain psychedelics affect, how certain festivals have effect, but we know very little what's the impact to the society, and we just often pretend that okay, it's not going to impact anyway, but when it has a massive impact. And also like it's what we mean by critical psychedelic studies is that there are more and more voices, for example, towards MAPS. And MAPS is the organization who is basically funding a lot of psychedelic research and is aiming, in other words, to monopolize MDMA therapies globally. And there is no discussion about it, but it's very much in their mission. And of course it's doing a great thing, but at the same time there is this within the machine when you look into it. And then a critical voice is on towards Silicon Valley, that now microdosing and the whole psychedelic movement is being monetized because of Silicon Valley's greedy capitalist engine. And it's not on the people, it's in the system. And then what I have been talking with colleagues is that this second renaissance will be remembered as a time when the wisdoms were taken from indigenous communities. And they were taken for the service of capitalism. And that's happening in this very moment. And I don't want to bring any of this down. I just want to be realistic that it's something that I'm fairly convinced this time will be on that. And then there is a critique towards within the US context, especially is use of psychedelics, is it on simply dividing the society more because it's elitist and like and also is it strengthening the neoliberalism paradigm and all of that. And that's simply like, I don't know what is right or wrong, and it's not my job to claim what is right or wrong, but I think it's fascinating that it's the psychedelic research field is progressing towards this, and we are seeing more and more journals, and also this is more accessible. Like many of these that I'm referring to, these studies, these are all open access. So they're chosen for that particular reason. Then moving towards the topic with this intro is that let's start to look a bit of transformation. As with any, let's play a bit of with the definitions, is that when we talk about transformation, what do we mean? Is that transformation experiences are experiences that change the person both cognitively and personally. It is something that cannot be experienced without the specific experience. And especially with psychedelics, it's extremely powerful one. And that's what differentiates the transformation. Like basically, it's this pen is sold these days as transformational pen, so it's a bit tricky concept, but nevertheless, when we are talking about within context of psychedelics, it is very powerful still. And there has been discussion to kind of have a different concept, different name, but this is currently what our common agreement on transformation is, and ours is the scholar community. Then on few examples on this, and I don't know if you can read it. Can you see at to a certain extent, and there is no need if you cannot, is on I can summarize this, is that the studies that categorize the for example, this particular study, a transformative trip experiences of psychedelic use. How they categorize it is that there are two stories, data examples selected on this, and the left one is describing how the person could manage to talk to herself and step out of the role of herself and go into the childhood. And without psychedelics, that could be a fairly difficult thing to do, that there is front of you, you are discussing with you. And so it kind of like these type of examples differentiate from a what's called perhaps a regular transformative experience, that something changes, you want to stop smoking or something like that. And the second thing is what I think is very common is that a person describes how heavily he was driven by money and how these experiences changed. And that's what we see all the time, especially with entrepreneurs. We are seeing that the businesses change towards more sustainable models. And personally, I think, of course, like that's a great thing, but we do not have literally any studies on that. And why do we don't have is that what I didn't mention is that many scholars study these as hobbies. Of course, there are like clinical studies are different. They are funded, but many like the other streams are still as hobbies because it's very difficult to get funding to it. Like it's I've been working with Academy of Finland, Royal Society, British Academy fundings, but I could never apply to this. And now I'm saying it publicly to the camera that hopefully that day someday comes. But let's see. It's on so these kind of experiences are more and more mapped, and it might sound very obvious to you that okay, these festivals have impact, but once it's scientifically something the beautiful thing with science is that it lasts through time, and that also that it opens up a room for more discussion, and when the theories are developed, those also last through the time. So in that sense, the more evidence we get, the better is. And then coming to this particular setting, transformative festival. What do we mean by transformative festival? Is that it's a usually most often a week-long event with psychedelic influences. The festival aims to provide participants with an environment that encourages personal growth, self-development, and change, as well as spiritual and emotional well-being. And these type of festivals, it's there is no categorizing to it, but they include music workshops, seminars, and other activities that aim to promote community and self-exploration. For example, having a lecture space, it's a wonderful thing, and having a different type of not only music. Obviously, music plays very important role, but these are becoming more and more mini cities, mini villages. And why the week long? Why it's categorized as week long? There is a massive difference between a weekend one and a week long. And when I'm talking about massive, what we are seeing is that in the quantitative big data sets, something happens during a third and fourth day. Like that's probably, we don't know the actual reason, but it takes a while the person to immerse itself to the environment and open up, and towards it the experience simply gets stronger. With weekend events it can be a bit rushed, and also on in this particular setting where we are talking is it's focused on large events. There are multiple multiple week-long events, and those events all share the same, more or less the same principles when it comes like how do they change people. And now I'm going to show you, what I'm going to show you next is the most cutting edge study that we currently know is this. It basically asks a very broad question. What impacts do transformational festivals have on the individual? And when it's in a context of large scale, it has 6 field studies of 7-day events and 22 surveys and 4,500 respondents before, after, and during the event. And so it's basically it's published in Nature Communications, which is top journal. And what obviously, like when we can all imagine when doing field research in this environment, like it's fairly challenging. Like let's say that I would put you in front of you now a survey of 5 pages. Would you stay here? Exactly. Yeah. So that's a kind of and it's not like that it would be on the people who are in the festival. No, it's simply like I wouldn't answer that. No, like it's like it's tricky. It is a very tricky environment. So but we'll come back to it. How it is possible in these environments. It's what the results say is that experiencing transformation is what we described as transformation. It's common, and its intensity increases with the time spent in the environment. Like I mentioned, that what might be obvious for us in this space, it's important that it's also now known as it's proven scientifically. And then what's one of the most generic categorizations is that people feel sense of more universal connection and also gain new insights about the others and developed increase of better moral. And that's a big statement. And so it's what's moral? And we of course all have our different value sets, but moral is honesty, it's respect towards others, and willingness to help. So how did the researcher solve the problem of handing out surveys in the event? They gamified it. They gamified it all. Like it's simply like I would then ask you to play dictator game. Like it's how friendly would you or how evil would you be to a person next to you or the unknown person? How are you doing in the early of the week? How are you doing at the end of the week? And that's how they got the results on. And then surveys were like standard surveys before and after. And so that's how these results came through. And that it's now a fact that in summary, we tend to come out from these events as a better persons. And that then leaves out of this particular paper, leaves out of the question what is the role of psychedelics. Like there are certain assumptions, certain data, but it's not part of this particular paper. And what is then also these events is it's something that is also, it's not studied, is that these are pretty good venues for sustainability education. It's what was the surprising finding that was not included is the changes are permanent. And that's apologies, I forgot to mention that. Yes, that was a very big discovery that it's permanent, they stay. And I give you an example is that there is a common saying that do not do any life-changing decisions for a month after any burn. And because you are not feeling, you are not in yourself at the moment. You're experiencing something really different, be it high, be it like connectedness. That your decision might be a bit too brave for your life as such. And so in these, and then it comes down. And that's what we see is that it then is people see that month perhaps like, okay, it was that I was so kind of wild, and of course it can be beautiful, but the decisions on that might be a bit controversial for one's life. So, and then something comes down, and then it's like, it's a discussion of the impact. When we go to these events, like, what's then the meaning of it when it comes down? And so studying something, those that then stay, like your perception of others, that do you trust others more after going to the event? Or do you still trust in the same way? Or do you see, let's say, issues around protecting nature in a similar way or not, if that has been on the topic? So on that is a permanent. Of course, it's very individual, and in that sense. And then on I had on those. The second thing on the permanent was, well, I'll come back to it now. I'm forgetting it. But on the sustainability education is that here we are exposed to very new things. And perhaps not for all, but for many. So be it ways of be it in the products, in the ways of people behaving, workshops, and all of that, and also prototyping. And what I mean by prototyping is these are pretty good places for what you are seeing. The picture is a prototype of called Shiftpod. And Shiftpod was developed to a desert as a tent because it's so hellish. And it's by default the Burning Man events around in locations that try effectively to kill you. So it's and that's why they are in these locations. And so then it was former NASA engineers developed this, and now it's been also piloted in refugee camps. So in that sense, it's these can be, and we've been also prototyping few things, and I'm going to share one slide afterwards, and also experiment the future cities. The future of energy, like it's how, because we all know the direction we are heading, so future cities might be desert cities, or they are. And Black Rock City can be is a prime example on that. And also how to do everything solar. That's one. So that's how these transformative festivals come to have their impact. And also, what's the role of community? The role of community is something that is, again, less studied, but we do know the role of communities in other, like in the startup worlds, and of course, the role of community is nothing new. Like we've been in communities since we've started to hunt, and even before we invented fire, like communities is in our genes, of course, very well. Very deeply, but what's when we are talking about the role of community in these environments is that they nurture, they bring safety, and they bring the safety to explore. They bring the safety to try out, to test oneself, and that's what is that the community particularly is I would say good for here. And here is an example of a study. Epic Tribe, the analysis of underground rave community, and what was perhaps the kind of like central finding was that when this was done in Asia, the study, people as a result of going to underground raves had a more positive view towards the planet. And I'm sharing you very positive studies, yes, but of course there are like there are dark sides of this, like it's that nobody knows how addictive, for example, the events can be. And I personally know people like retired entrepreneurs who are like always wanted to push new, and they ended up like being hooked to burns. And with burns I mean like there are hundreds of Burning Man events, and you can go to one every week, and there are people who can go easily to 30 events per year. And it is like a drug. So, and it's tough for the mind, of course, but then you're hooked to an environment that is the reality where everything is possible. So, in that sense, there are, of course, on the darker side, and we can have a chat on that. Now we are coming towards the end of this particular part, the research part. If you are interested, and next we are going to go to the stories, but if you are interested on more, is that there is fairly interesting seminar coming up. Of course, there are a lot of these, but this particular in Iceland, it's has a pretty top speakers, and also there is the abstract track that colleagues and I are going to do in a very non-scientific format. So if the science on psychedelic resonates with you, good to keep psychedelics in Iceland in mind, and there are of course many others, like breaking convention can be always recommended in the UK. Any questions on? We are going to next look the stories, and then we are heading towards to the exciting part of looking a bit of what the data. Asking question why is perhaps the best question there is, and so one could ask, like, why? Why did a team of scholars establish a Burning Stories collective and started to study transformation, like as a hobby even, like spending time in environments that are like these are, as a management scholar, these are, like, I would say, career suicide, like in terms of traditional format. But still, what ignited this was a project of 2017, was called Space on Fire. It was an insane volunteer project taking place in Burning Man, where a group of 50 people studied, built a wooden installation, 300 square meters, and had a satellite ground station on it. And none of the people could build, none. And we had a management team in it, and we were so scared, like, okay, we didn't know at any point what we were doing, no, and yet it was managed to build, and it became this type of installation. So it had a 350 unique wooden pieces, really big ones, and it had a satellite station, ground station on it, and we took data from space, and that was projected, and people could send their messages to space, and people ordered pizza mainly, and we were very excited in the beginning, like, okay, like, what are going to people send, and well, you order pizza, but yeah. So on, and then like building this, it was a year-long project, and for the sponsor itself, and the company did never say its name. For the sponsor itself, this was a structure to be tested that it's now built as a school. So the argument was that because hippies are of course going to climb on it, and hippies, like, people never use the installation it's intended to use, like when it's that kind of participatory piece. So that was tested, like, okay, it's very safe structure, and then it's what happened was towards end of the week, when it came time to burn it, we had difficulties, like we could not ship it back. Of course, we shipped it in a container, but like no way we could ship it back, and so we burned it. And then when it came down, people started to share stories like time stopped, and something like really happened. Is that because then also our journey became towards end. That was effectively the death of that particular project. And people who came to the burn itself, it's fairly difficult process. If you think about that, we are now on an event Wednesday. That burn was on Friday. You're being for the whole week with the 50 people project team, no phones, and then you just know, like, we need 100 people sober, 10 p.m. Friday, no phones, to the perimeter, and otherwise we are not burning it. And then, like, it's because people might run to the flames. Like, that happens not well yearly, at least one. And now it's the safety is in a very heavy level. But like, it's doing that effort is that then people started also to share stories like, okay, it's that I trusted people so much. Like, it's I don't even know these people yet. We did something like really unique, and that changed the I perceive life. And we started to study that retrospectively. And then we looked at data, and when I looked at it for the first time, I simply saw management processes. Like, okay, this is self-organized, this is where we had something. And then a philosopher. I don't know if you have come across the happiness thing of Finland, that we are now sixth time the happiest nation on the planet, and we are really pissed off about it. Yes. Yeah, like that's the happiness thing. So the philosopher involved in that, Frank Martela, he looked at data, and he said like, hey, Yuki, cannot you see like it's the psychological safety is in it, and that it's something that was created because people had the possibility by accident simply to do what they wanted within the project. And like if you wanted to do a seminar, if you wanted to do anything, you could do it, but you could simply take, you're taking responsibility of it. And then having this crazy vision that, okay, we are having satellite ground station on it in for what? And so that these two things created that this voluntary project enabled, and the stories in it got so interesting that we decided to study it a bit more. Where do we study it? This is Black Rock City, so Burning Man, 70,000 people, and it has one particular place that is, and we can have many opinions about what Burning Man is or what it's not. It's when there are 70,000 people, there are 70,000 Burning Mans, and it has its downsides for sure, and it has its positive sides for sure, and so, but there is one particularly interesting place, which is called Deep Playa, and it's on the right side. You are seeing the city map, and on the right side there is the desert. And it's just, you just start cycling, and you just like cycle towards nothingness. And there comes very deep art also, like really that is quite often challenging you. And people go there to deal, for example, with tough experiences. They go intentionally to trip there, for example. And then you come towards the trash fence, and that is where the thing ends. And it's really far away. And we collected data from the trash fence, and it's very interesting thing that is going on there. Like it's because it's such a black hole of that, and doing that in was extremely challenging. In like when you think about that kind of place and how do you collect then the stories of that. Then it's also about like when we wanted to know like, okay, what's going on there in this ground zero. If I would ask, for example, if I would ask anyone from you from 2 weeks from here, what are you experiencing now? It's very different story than you would tell it now. So it changes quite a bit, and then so it's biased data. We started to think, okay, how about it could be collected exactly when it happens and without any human intervention? Is that possible? Develop this device, and it was sponsored by the Borderland community, which is the Nordic, say, Burning Man towards it, and has its principles, but has excellent art grant system, which is that you all buy a ticket membership, and 90% of that membership is directed to a platform where any one of us can propose art project, and community decides what art is brought to the event, and you need to discuss and evaluate others' projects. So it's pretty decent. So we developed these kind of cubes, and which capture, like they go around the event, and when it comes across to you, there are 10 of these. You press a button, share a story, it gives instructions, and then it's press a button and it shuts down. And it has a hippie-proof user interface, which is that light comes on, light comes off. There's nothing else. And that's how it's tried to be kept safe. Unfortunately, many of these got stolen, and it's something that is, it's a bit tricky. Like now they are like really hard-coded, the memory cards, and it says that return the cube when if it doesn't have a battery anymore. But like we can guess like it's people take souvenirs, people take like all kinds of, and within the small events they always are returned. So we've now put these into a certain place that I'm going to present fairly shortly, very soon, and collected. That's the way we got data from Black Rock City and from the Deep Playa. Then another example how to access this is that, for example, here the cubes would work. Yeah, for sure. I'll probably bring them next year, and you'll find them going around. Do share your story if you come across. This is something that is very Burning Man specific, is that when then building a piece to Black Rock City, I don't assume it happens here because what the data says from Burns is they're much more radical. Like it's because the capitalism rules are not within the event, and it's intended to be much more aggressive in terms of transformation. It's also that people might poo in an installation, and people by default sleep in the installation and have sex in the installation. So that was our design. We needed to design like what's a piece that collects data but is not place for sex or sleeping. So that's where you see upside down pyramid or a pyramid that is only that you cannot sleep or have sex because it has only the up covered. So that's how we kind of like needed to figure out the and these architects who give their pro bono expertise when we are doing these mad science experiments. And it's good fun. It's good fun, like to figure out these type of things, because it's something that is by default happening, and in reality it became this. And so there you can see what is labeled on the right side as a hippie trap. And what I mean by that is that one can see when this is on dplyr, and it's lights on, and then we take a bit of distance, and you start to see the cycle lights. Like it attracts, of course. Like we all are attracted by light, and it's in the complete darkness. So it works to quite a bit. And then on that managed to collect data for 2 days last year, and then became the mud. And which is interesting that somebody went during the mud and had there's some stuff over there. But but that's how these things are progressing. And for example, in this particular location, that fits to a suitcase. So I personally hope that it would be here in the future year for sure. And then when I mentioned that these are experimental venues, this is something that we hope that it will be done, is that this piece is a place, intimate space for story sharing that would be built to an Amazon later, where it's a small project with FARC combatants who are now with a peace deal with Colombian government, and our aim is to study how entrepreneurship is bringing more peace there. And so if it works in festival environment, the assumption it works everywhere. Yes, and then moving towards the last section is how the data is used. Any questions at this moment? Yep.
It's just that you're gathering lots of data through these portals and surveys, but how do you actually stop a confirmation bias by only the positive participants go to the booths or actually take the survey, and maybe people who are a little bit negative or not transformative don't bother?
Yep. Very good question is there are two things in that. We do not claim that that data would be high quality, because we do not ask any participant infos in these particular stories. We then have a really hardcore research project about the strategies and overall like transformation in where we ask in a survey we ask much more. But in these stories it's actually it's the opposite. It's because our position is that we simply act as a kind of a funnel of stories from different communities, and I'm going to soon show where they are all shared. Is that you are not leaving in a way customer feedback. You're simply leaving as the experience as it is, and there are wild experiences, like there are mental illnesses and like negative content for sure, and it's of course like there is this other like bad experience as a whole, but we don't have access to that. Like people who, for example, leave in the middle of the event. No, and it's something we are not. This particular story data won't be published in a like really high quality scientific journal, but the method will be. And the stories itself, they are meant for the communities, to give the community back the wisdoms that they share. And how it's going to be done, I'll share you a bit. And you're going to actually see a very negative story and what the impact of that was in actually in the, not this slide, but the next one. We have like hundreds of stories, but now it's identified 140 usable ones. Like it's because there are alien kidnappings, there are a bunch of like all kinds of stuff. and some written and then some recorded. And the smaller one is 5 stories from one event, and then from Borderland, I think in Nordics there are total of those events are roughly 50. And there are big differences in stories from Boom, and now there is a first conference paper out of that. And then so what's common in those is that there is a field report that we published 2020 on it, like it's the first stages. Okay, what we are seeing is that there are big differences between the communities, and obviously in this community as well. And we cannot say what makes the transformation as such, but also is that what we are seeing is that the smaller event, the more deeper the transformation is, which is I don't know if it's right or not, but it seems to be that there is less noise when it's more intimate. But of course, like it's then it has the other way around, is that does it give the room to explore, for example. So in that sense, it's the use of the data at the moment is that it's for artistic use, and it's for certain snapshots of it can be used for the community development. And what are the artists doing with it is 2 artists, Finnish artist of Mikko Heikinpoika and then Viljami Lehtonen. They've done tracks out of the voice data, and tracks in a way that can be blended with the music that one does, and it's fairly interesting that you can deliver people's wisdoms through music. And then it's shows the power of one negative story, and it's fairly big power. What it does is that in this particular story, this was collected 2019 on an online platform, and presented in a conference. I presented in a conference in Switzerland and the Burning Man CEO Marianne was among the audience, and she got on this is that when I show this, that this is the type of stories we get, is where a 70-year-old male artist describes how the art cars are not taking him for the evening, for the ride, because they only want beautiful women in their 20s. And she got shocked. Like this is not the culture we wish to be involved in, and we wish to build. So this was not the reason, but it was partially supportive to a major thing that happened as a result of, and this is on the posting she wrote, the main posting since the last 5-10 years Burning Man has had, which is the cultural correction. And it's it ended up in New York Times that Burning Man kicks the wealthy camps. Like it was a kind of a cleaning of the city. The plug and play rich camps away, and also that discrimination should be paid attention on. So like it's yes, when there are the critical voices, they like that's an example of one particular story, having so like when you are being asked, like be it me or be anyone, like to share your opinion, share your stories, it has a difference. It can make a difference. It really can. So it's and what it shows to us is that people who read these stories, and you have access as well. It's something what they share is, and that is very transformative itself, is that we all are here with so different mindsets. Like it's so surprising how we are here, and it's we can be in a very fragile state. We can be in you name it, and opening up that mind space is something that I think this particular project is currently doing fairly well. In terms of when I mentioned that it's going to be available for you all, so what we've done is we've given birth to a hippie AI, and it's launched for everyone on October. It has all the stories. It has 300 different research pieces, and it's operating as a standalone. And now and you can chat with it. You can chat with the hippie AI, and that it's only has even the stories and the research, and then you can start chat with it. And you can download all the stories, and you can also download the research abstracts. So I'll ask Modem to put the website out once we are live, and of course, like, it will be then for years to come, and it also will ask to share your story. So that it's a repository of, like, basically the communities I presented on the Transformative Festival communities. And then that's how it looks. It's a 3D map, and you can navigate through that map and also find different themes on the map on particular set. And we asked it to do art. And we gave a prompt that, okay, you can only use one article or you can use one research piece, and it makes sense. Like, this is a trilogy that it made, and then what happened after that was we've experienced 2 weeks ago, experimented that a visionary artist called Luca Delgado started paint on top of it, so that human starts to share a story. It starts with a human. AI makes sense out of it with its wisdom of all the research, all the other stories, and then a human finalizes it. And we of course all know what AI art is. AI art is pretty AI art, but like, we are experimenting now this type of new process. Now I wanna end with this. This is that on the scientific front there are 2 pieces of research. Is that the other one is that going to parties is good for you. It's this particular research that it's brings the social life, brings more sociality on when people go this, and this was unsurprisingly published during the pandemic. And then there is the other thing is this is a massive review. The other research is like it looks what is good for depression. What are the methods that are good for depression? And yes, yoga is there, meditation is there. Number 1, dancing, and so that's a meta-analysis. Like, it's basically a summary of all types of all kinds of, I think, 200 pieces of research. Yes. So let's take a look. Few examples. I start with there will be Boom, Osora, Black Rock City, roughly 8 of them. And these are like very, I would say, quite standard type. Is that this is from DeepLaya that I mentioned example, and this is person is yesterday we landed on a strange planet. Creatures are around us. They have a weird style. That's okay. They don't know who we are, because we too are part of the change. We are beginning to change. Is that we are beginning to merge with the crowd. So a person basically tells a story that it's kind of like perhaps for the first time or second time. And what is commonly known, this is not exactly studied, but something happens during the third event. Week-long event. It doesn't need to be burned. It doesn't need to be like any type of, but third event. Be it that something happened, and it's simply an average that like really seasoned people seem to observe, and it's of course very individual. But like it usually the first event in any, like, okay, where I come to, why I'm here, a lot of questioning, couple of bad trips, all kinds of stuff can happen. So this is an example of that. And then Borderland. When we talk about the kind of scary stuff and negative stories, this is content we also get. This is very challenging. Is that so basically this particular person has ended up to a portal, and is that he's tuning into a part of herself that is really dominant and manipulative. And with ketamine right now, I feel as if I have magic powers that I'm able to control reality. And what the person has done, this is this long story, is she has taken ketamine and is in this kind of state that she's giving ketamine to other people, and they just had an orgy, and she is basically in charge of the reality in what the way she sees it, and transforming others. So it's something that it's powerful, and it's kind of like, again, like it's fairly intensive on it, and then there are these type of things that is this is my personal favorite, is that you just it's hard to describe. Like it's the whole story is about man describing like here. I eat one yogurt. When it was finished, I put the spoon back in a yogurt container. The spoon fell onto the side. It was if the whole thing had collapsed. It was on the floor. At that moment, I was disappointed with the universe. Like, why did they even create such thing? I don't understand it. What is the story? That's the story. What life even means? So basically, that a spoon drops, it's enough for a person to kind of like boof. And it's in a very beautiful way that this particular was actually used also by the artist, that what does life even mean? Is and that small thing can trigger what's the meaning of life. And then boom. Boom is my assumption is, and I would really love if you those who have the stamina and feel like it, like if you want to share a short story and we can have a circle on it and even share a bit of those, is that it was very surprising to look into Boom. Is roughly 50 people, and it's like the burn events. It's kind of like they rip person off and something like massive discoveries come and also, of course, there was the same, like, nurturing is there. But in Boom, it's kind of like people came seem to come to the event in a very fragile mind. Of course, again, those who shared, of course, it's very small minority, is that, and then Boom, and that environment is providing the safety, the well-being for person to feel safe to explore. Even the tough emotions, tough experiments, and it's that type of thing that and bringing hope for this particular person. He's less alone with his thoughts, experiencing freedom, connection, and support from everyone. Returning here is like recharging myself in a long transformation process. That's what we see common, is that people long the returning here. Are you like are you regularly in Modem? Who is for the first time? Nice. So we are in the same boat. No. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. On the yeah, but usually like what happens then that people long to like get a pretty strong affection to the particular community, and Boom is something that really seem to have that to quite a big extent. Then interesting one is Ozora. You're familiar? Yep. Yep. That's that seems to be, I learned last year when doing a bit of a lecture tour, is that it's this really beautiful route. Starts from Boom and then a couple of events and then Ozora and then here. And it's like a pilgrimage and to a certain extent. And so Ozora, this story, and this is a long one and very beautiful one, extremely powerful one, is a person is sharing like the struggles of being autistic and like how that life is basically hell. And then on this particular event, like taking a bit of psychedelics in the opening was a kind of a like macro experience. And of course, like when we are talking about the opening is something that is we see in the religious, we see like all the communities have the massive opening where people are kind of like tuned in. So he had a very powerful connection in that, and brought him to tears, and it's only if we could find a way to reach this in daily life. And that's often like what we also see, is that how could daily life, what can we take from these environments to a daily life? And that's a very hot topic also to study. And then for the autistic people, this is really something we long just to get a place where you can be yourself and feel connected, at least for that one night. And that's something that, like, it's of course like personally, when doing be it ethnography in certain environments or interacting with data, it's these type of stories that also motivate. Is that it's these type of environments bring so much comfort, and possibilities for people. It's really, yeah, how to say, beautiful. So on that was the lecture. Hope you enjoyed it. 90% of you seem to be awake for the time being, so I take that as a massive compliment, given that we are in this environment. Big thanks, and this was really a pleasure.